In the early hours of January 1st, 2023, just a few minutes after the 12th midnight that marked the beginning of the new year, Mr. and Mrs. Fatinoye, their only son Oreoluwa, and their domestic staff Felix Oloruyomi returned from a crossover service in church to their residence in the Ibara area of Abeokuta, Ogun State, Nigeria. Since it was the first day of the year, people were still on the streets celebrating the new year, while others who had gone to the church for their crossover service were still returning home, just like the Fatinoye's family did. However, around 1:30 a.m., smoke was seen coming out of the couple's residence, followed by a strong fire. The neighbors who witnessed the fire may have thought it was accidental, but in a few hours, the truth will turn out to be more heartbreaking than they would have ever imagined. The concerned neighbors rushed into the couple's residence to try and rescue the family, but on getting into the house, they found Mr. and Mrs. Fatinoye lying dead and seriously burnt by the fire. The couple's only son was missing, and so was their domestic staff. The couple's car was also missing from the compound, which indicated that someone had left the premises since the couple returned from church in the missing car. However, it was unlikely that the person who left the residence was a stranger, because the family had a German Shepherd as a security dog. The neighbors never heard the dog bark, nor did they see any signs that the dog had attacked an intruder. After this horrific discovery, Mr. Fatinoye's friend called the brother, Samuel Fatinoye, who resided in Lagos State, asking him to rush down to his brother's residence in Ogun State, that something had happened to him. When Samuel asked what was wrong, the brother's friend refused to reveal the tragic news, but rather insisted that he came down to his brother's residence in Abeokuta. Mr. Samuel rushed down to Ogun State, which is a neighboring state to Lagos, where he resided. On arriving at the couple's residence, he went straight to his brother's bedroom, where he found his corpse and that of his wife. Filled with tears, as what was supposed to be a New Year's Day, brimming with joy, celebration, and hope for a better year, had now transformed into a sorrowful one right before his very eyes. The couple's missing son and domestic staff could not be accounted for, and so was their family car. The police were called to the scene, where they began their investigation into uncovering the circumstances surrounding the couple's tragic death. On examination of the body, it was found that Mr. Kehinde had his throat slit with a knife, while his wife, Mrs. Bukola, had her head struck with a hammer. It was then established that what they had before them was a murder case designed to look like arson. Since the couple had a personal driver and their car was also missing, the police used circumstantial evidence to link the driver to the case. Lekon Adekombi, who had been Mr. Fatinoye's driver for over 4 years, was arrested by the police and then taken in for questioning. While Lekon was still in police custody that day, something miraculous happened. The domestic staff who went missing, along with the couple's only son, returned home with minor injuries to provide more shocking details about what happened that night. According to Felix, the attackers tied his hands and that of Oreoluwa, put them in the trunk of the family car, and then drove them to the Ogun River Bridge, where they were both thrown into the river to drown. However, luckily for him, the rope used to tie his hands loosened, and he was able to swim out of the water. Unfortunately, Oreoluwa was not so lucky, as he drowned in the water that night. The news about what happened at the Ogun River spread, and fishermen who fish in the water were also fully aware of the tragic incident. After hearing this revelation from Felix, the police went to the river in search of Oreoluwa's body, but it could not be found. The police then asked the fishermen to contact them whenever it floated. Now, while Lekon was still in custody that January 1st, word got to him that one of the victims thrown into the river had survived. It was reported that this discovery got him restless, especially after he saw Felix in person. It is not known if the assailants wore masks to carry out the attack, but for some reason, Felix seemed to have not recognized Lekon, who had been the family driver for over 4 years. Feeling fearful that he would be caught, Lekon was said to have collapsed inside his cell after complaining of fever. This prompted 2 policemen to rush him to the hospital for treatment. However, while in the hospital, Lekon, who was not handcuffed by the police, pretended as though he wanted to urinate and then used the opportunity to escape from the hospital by jumping over the fence. His escape from the hospital further strengthened the police's suspicion that he had something to do with the events of that night. However, this act of carelessness from the police was not to go unpunished. When word got out that the prime suspect in the tragic case had escaped from police custody, the divisional police officer of Ibarra Police Station, where Lekon was initially held, was removed for negligence and then replaced by another senior officer. The 2 policemen under whose watch Lekon escaped from the hospital were also sanctioned. Due to this disappointing development, the Ogun State Commissioner of Police ordered the State Anti-Kidnapping Unit to join forces with the Homicide Unit in order to get Lekon Adekombi and his accomplices arrested. While the fishermen at the Ogun River were preparing to start work around 7:30 a.m. on the 3rd day after the tragic incident, they discovered Oreoluwa's body floating in the water and then pulled it out to the river bank. His hands were found tied behind his back, just as the domestic staff had explained. The discovery was reported to the police, who brought Felix along to help identify the corpse. After the body was positively identified to be Oreoluwa, it was taken away by the police as they continued their investigation. Mr. Kehinde Fatinoye was a former employee of the Central Bank of Nigeria, while his wife, Mrs. Bukola Fatinoye, was an employee of the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Ogun State. The couple had been married for over 20 years and had 2 children between them. Oreoluwa was their eldest child and was said to be doing his master's degree before his tragic death. The second son was said to have collapsed and died while playing a football match in school in June 2022, barely a year before the entire family was eventually wiped out. After the Commissioner of Police had given his directive, the 2 teams embarked on a technical and intelligence-driven investigation to recapture Lekon Adekombi and his accomplices. The teams were able to trace Lekon's location to his elder brother's house in Oyo State. However, when they got to the house, Lekon had already left. The team intensified their efforts, and this led to the arrest of Lekon Adekombi at his hideout in Abeokuta 21 days after the crime was committed. Lekon was taken into custody once again, and upon interrogation, he confessed to being the mastermind behind the 3 tragic murders. Lekon told the police that he had been Mr. Fatinoye's driver since 2018 and that he approached him to request a salary increase, which he refused. Lekon then asked the couple for a loan so that he could buy a motorcycle, but once again, his request was said to have been rejected. This didn't sit well with him, so he came up with a plan to rob the couple. To pull this off, he recruited 2 of his friends, Ahmed Adetola and Wahid Adeniyi, who were reported to be members of the same cult group he belonged to join him in the robbery operation. The 3 suspects decided to launch the attack on the 1st of January 2023, immediately after the couple had returned from the crossover service. Since Lekon had access to the residence, he led his 2 accomplices into the compound to wait for the couple's return. The security dog in the residence didn't cause any trouble for the 3 attackers because it was familiar with Lekon Adekombi since he was the one who used to feed it. When the couple finally returned after midnight, Lekon and his accomplices attacked them immediately after they entered the house. They stole 6 mobile phones valued at 1.5 million naira and then forced Mr. Fatinoye to transfer money to Ahmed's Kuda Bank account. But unfortunately for them, the transfer failed to go through. This prompted Lekon to provide his Access Bank account, to which the sum of 1.1 million naira was transferred. After this transfer was made, it became clear to Lekon that his identity could be traced through the provided bank account. He then decided with the other two to silence the couple forever. Wahid Adeniyi was said to have gone to the kitchen to pick up a knife which he used to end Mr. Kehinde's life. Lekan had come for the operation with a sledgehammer which he reportedly used on Mrs. Bukola's head, ending her life on the spot. While the operation was going on, the couple's only son, Oreoluwa Fatinoye, and their domestic staff, Felix Oloriyomi, walked into the room and saw what was happening. The three attackers then pounced on them, tied their hands behind their backs, and then drove them in the trunk of the couple's car to the Ogun River Bridge, where they were thrown into the river. After committing this heinous act, they parked the couple's car somewhere and then called one Mr. Usman, whom they had already agreed to sell the car, valued originally at 15 million naira, for 150,000 naira. Mr. Usman then sent another person who went and drove the couple's car back to their workshop. At the workshop, they dismantled the vehicle and then sold them as spare parts. Wahid and Ahmed were arrested in February, over 1 month after the crime was committed. The two then revealed the identity of the other suspects who bought the couple's stolen car, thereby leading to their arrest. The police also arrested 2 women who assisted Lekan in relocating and hiding in their area, thereby preventing the police from arresting him. Mr. and Mrs. Fatinoye were buried in different caskets on January 2nd, just a day after their tragic death, while all 7 suspects involved in the crime were arraigned before a magistrate court in Abeokuta in February 2023. They were all ordered by the chief magistrate to be remanded in prison for 60 days pending further hearings. At the time this video was made, there was no news report or court document stating that a verdict had been reached for all the suspects involved. This could mean that the case is still active in court. It's just so heartbreaking to know that an entire family was lost within the span of 1 year just because of greed and entitlement. Let me know what you think about this case in the comments below.